Spring in Illinois, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He sits on both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Energy and Commerce Committees. Congressman, good to see you this morning.
You too. Thanks.
Is it responsible or is it alarming that John Bolton requested military options to potentially strike Iran if need be?
It's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm actually disappointed more in whoever in the Pentagon leaked this. A national security advisor has got to be able to have all options at hand. Doesn't mean we were about to strike Iran, but if these mortar attacks would have accelerated, or if there was a need ever to strike Iran in the future for any other action, that's an important thing to know. And the Pentagon has got to be willing, without leaking it, without being aghast, to give the national security advisor those options. I think to not do that from John Bolton's perspective would frankly be irresponsible, because then if the need arose, you have to spend days and days planning this now versus having those at your fingertips.
Yeah, these purported plans come from mortars, as you mentioned, that fell into the green zone that were traced back to Iran and an Iranian-backed group. One official called that an act of war. How would you characterize it?
Yeah, I think it would be also characterized an act of war. That doesn't mean that the response has to be that we go to war with Iran, but I think having that option on the table and making it clear that if you attack America or our interests, there could easily be some massive reaction to that. We have a great military and we have the ability to do that. The Pentagon has got to be willing to work with the civilian leadership who they are under to do things like this. And so whoever leaked this, I'm very disappointed in. And I think if we even go back to the Obama administration and say, how many times did they draw up plans to strike somewhere they didn't strike, there would probably be people saying, my goodness, I can't believe they did that either. But that's the purpose of a national security advisor, is to put options out there for a president.
Could the leak, though, be intentional? I mean, a message to the mullahs in Tehran to try and modify their behavior?
Yeah, that's possible, but it seems like to me, and what I've read, the way it was leaked was filled with people saying, I can't believe he requested these options, and I think it's good that he did. So I'm not sure the reason. I just think stuff like this, to the extent we can, keep him quiet. The president has got to have some security options at his fingertips, and a national security advisor is supposed to do that for him.
And critics would say if there were to be a strike of some sort, that would just unleash holy hell. I mean, talking about chaos in the Middle East, terror strikes by Tehran and Hezbollah. They have, Europe says they have assassination squads in Europe who have taken out dissidents and opponents of the regime. And it would be just a catastrophe.
Yeah, I certainly think there'd be a reaction. I'm not sure if it's quite as big as Iran tries to make it say. And that's probably why we didn't strike them, because we understand that there's a cost to doing it. But if you ever take on the U.S. military, you're going to lose. That's a fact. And so I think having things to say the cost of what you've done is certainly going to outweigh any benefit is very important.
And meanwhile, one of the Iranian officials is saying they may go up to 20% enriching uranium from the 3% now under the disputed nuclear deal. And the Europeans, France, and the U.S. warning Tehran against testing the ballistic missiles. They say they're going to put up some satellites in the coming weeks, which many think that's really cover for a ballistic missile that could carry a nuclear warhead. What is your message to Tehran? Secretary of State Pompeo says it violates UN Resolution 2231 that basically tells them not to test ballistic missiles.
Yeah, I mean, that's important. I think it's clear that there is going to be a reaction if they do this. Look, we're the United States of America. We can stop them from doing this if we want to. Keep in mind, Iran at the beginning said their only reason for any kind of a nuclear program was peaceful power. We know that's not true. And the Iran deal, which we pulled out of, basically had a horizon in which that whole deal would go away anyway. So, look, we don't want to find ourselves in military action against Iran, but I think it's important for Iran to understand that they will not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and we have the ability and capability to stop that from happening.
And meanwhile, here at home, the shutdown continues, day number 23 today. I mean, what type of, it's at an impasse. How do you think this will be broken? What do you think could happen to finally try and end it?
Well, my theory is something's probably going to have to come out of the Senate. I've been around long enough to know that that's typically where deals are. The Democrats have got to come off their position of no wall. The president has not said something like no dreamers or anything. He's willing to negotiate. The Democrats have to be too. We need to continue to have National Guard on the border. I'm going there in a couple of weeks to do my National Guard duty. But we need the National Guard on our side too. The RC-26, the aircraft that I fly, is the only aircraft in the Air Force inventory that can do Pillar 1 of the National national security strategy, which is counter drug and border security. And the Air Guard just announced they were getting rid of that at record pace, trying to outrun Congress. And I think without the president knowing about it, stuff like that, everybody needs to be on board to secure our border. We need Democrats willing to compromise. And frankly, Republicans will have to be willing to give up something we don't necessarily want either.
Tell us about your service. You're in the reserve. What do you do? What do you plan to be doing? You know, what are you going to be doing down at the border? And we are grateful and thank you for your service to this country, to leave Congress and be in the reserve and actually be deployed.
Oh, man, it's an honor to do it, and thanks for the opportunity to fly the aircraft for the military. I fly the RC-26. It's a reconnaissance plane. We do counter-drug. We do border patrol. In fact, my whole unit just left, and I'll be joining them for 2 weeks. They'll be there for 45 days. But the Air Guard just announced that they're getting rid of this aircraft, and they're trying to sell them off immediately because they want to outrun Congress and because they don't want the president and the administration to know about it. It is an amazing asset that at a very cheap rate has secured the border, has gone after drug cartels in the United States and on the border. I'm honored to be able to do it. I just hope that this deployment's not my last in this aircraft and that the Air Guard rethinks their decision.
So A, what are you calling on the president and Congress to do about your aircraft that you love so much?
Well, Congress very much supports it. There's a letter of 30 people that signed said we want to keep it. That's why the Guard basically announced it, and they're trying to sell it before we can stop it. If the president knew about this, I think he'd do something too.
All right, well, maybe he does now. What have you seen on the border, by the way, from the cockpit? I mean, when you're up there, have you seen the cartels? Have you interdicted drugs yourself? What have you done?
Yeah, so I've worked anti-cartel operations on the border. Well, we're going to be going to Tucson. Actually, my guys are in Tucson now. I've worked McAllen, Texas. That was where I did most of my work. And I'll tell you what, that is not a secure border. We would watch people, literally one group come across the border Border Patrol would react, they'd go into the water, the other group would come across, and it's like this Benny hill show where everybody's kind of back and forth until one group can make it over. We've got to have a wall in certain areas, and we need more technology on the border to secure it, and then we can fix the big immigration system, which we all need to do.
Well, the Democrats supported the Secure Fence Act back in 2006. They were for a fence back then. We'll see what happens on Capitol Hill. Congressman, thank you, and thank you again for your service. And certainly, I guess,
God bless anytime.
Absolutely, happy flying when you're down there. We'll catch up with you when you get down there in a few weeks.
Sounds great. Sounds great.